Fear has a specific scent, and inside Chicago's most exclusive restaurant it smelled like expensive cologne and hushed whispers. Whenever the city's most dangerous syndicate leader demanded his usual corner table, seasoned servers suddenly vanished. But tonight, a new hire who didn't know the rules took his order. The Velvet Room, located just off Rush Street, was the kind of establishment where a single dinner could cover a month's rent. It was an ecosystem of old money, hushed political deals and unspoken rules. The most critical of these rules belonged to table number 4, a secluded, dimly lit booth in the far corner. It was unofficially reserved for one man, Damian King. Damian was not a politician, nor was he a celebrity, though his name appeared often enough in heavily redacted federal documents. He was the heir and undisputed head of the King Syndicate, a sprawling network of illicit operations masked by legitimate real estate ventures. When Damian walked through the mahogany doors of the Velvet Room, flanked by his imposing enforcers, the temperature in the room seemed to drop. The pianist always played a little softer. The wealthy patrons averted their eyes. On this particular Tuesday evening, as rain lashed against the high windows, Damian strode in. The general manager, Richard Henderson, immediately broke into a cold sweat. "He's here," Richard hissed to the staff gathered near the kitchen doors. "Where is David? David usually takes him." "David called in sick," whispered Jessica, a veteran waitress whose hands were already trembling. "And Tom is hiding in the walk-in freezer. You remember what happened last time? Damian fired a busboy on the spot and threatened to burn the place down because his steak was medium instead of rare." Panic rippled through the staff. No one wanted to approach table 4. Damian was notorious for his ruthless demeanor, his biting insults, and the silent, terrifying aura that surrounded him. He didn't just demand perfection, he demanded subservience. Standing at the edge of the huddle was Chloe Adams. Hired exactly 3 days ago, Chloe was oblivious to the underworld politics of Chicago. She was 23, exhausted, and desperately needed this job. Her younger brother Liam had managed to accrue a massive gambling debt, and the threatening phone calls to their apartment had escalated into physical intimidation. She didn't have the luxury of fear, she only had the necessity of survival. "I'll take him," Chloe said, her voice cutting through the panicked whispers. Richard stared at her as if she had just volunteered for a firing squad. "Chloe, you don't understand who that is. That is Damian King. If you look at him the wrong way, he can ruin your life. Actually, he can end it." "If I don't get some tables tonight, I can't make rent," Chloe replied flatly, smoothing down her black apron. "He's just a man hungry for dinner. I'll be fine." Before Richard could stop her, Chloe picked up a leather-bound menu, a silver pitcher of iced water, and marched across the dining room. Damian King was already seated, his dark, tailored suit perfectly pressed, his posture immaculate. He was terrifyingly handsome, with sharp, aristocratic features and eyes the colour of dark slate. 2 massive bodyguards stood discreetly in the shadows a few feet away. As Chloe approached, Damian didn't even look up from his phone. "Good evening," Chloe said, her tone professional lacking the tremor that Damian was so accustomed to hearing. "Welcome to the Velvet Room. May I start you off with some water?" Damian slowly lowered his phone. He looked at the silver pitcher, then up at Chloe. His gaze was heavy, calculating, designed to make people squirm. Chloe simply looked back, her posture straight, offering a polite but distinctly impenetrable smile. "Are you lost, sweetheart?" Damian's voice was a low, rough baritone that commanded immediate authority. Usually Henderson sends one of his terrified little veterans over here to tremble while pouring my drinks. "They seemed busy trembling in the kitchen," Chloe replied smoothly. "So you get me. Sparkling or still?" The silence that followed was deafening. The bodyguards in the shadows shifted, their hands drifting toward their jackets. Damian's eyes narrowed. No one spoke to him with such casual defiance. Not his rivals, not his underbosses, and certainly not a waitress at a steakhouse. "Still," Damian finally said, a dangerous edge creeping into his voice, "and if you spill a single drop on this table, you'll be sweeping the floors of a fast food joint by tomorrow morning." "I have excellent hand-eye coordination, Mr. King," Chloe said, pouring the water flawlessly, leaving not a single droplet on the white linen. "Have you decided on your order? or do you need more time with the menu?" Damian leaned forward, resting his elbows on the table, invading her space. "I want the bone-in ribeye, blue rare. If it's cooked a second over lukewarm, I'm sending it back. And bring me a glass of the Macallan 25. The chef highly recommends pairing the ribeye with a robust Cabernet rather than Scotch to balance the richness of the fat," Chloe suggested, writing on her notepad. Damian's jaw clenched. Did I ask for the chef's recommendation, or did I order a Scotch? Most people would have backed down, apologised profusely and practically run away. Chloe simply finished writing, clicked her pen, and met his icy glare. "You ordered the Scotch," Chloe said evenly. "I'm just doing my job by offering the restaurant's expertise. But if you prefer to mask the flavour of a $100 steak with peat and smoke, I will gladly bring you the Macallan. Your meal will be out shortly." She turned on her heel and walked away, leaving Damian staring after her. A strange, unfamiliar feeling flickered in his chest. It wasn't anger. It was amusement. Back in the kitchen, Richard looked like he was about to faint. "What did he say? Did he fire you? Should I call security?" "He ordered a steak and a Scotch," Chloe said, pinning the ticket to the wheel. "He's a bit of an arrogant jerk, but nothing I can't handle. Fire the ribeye, blue rare." For the next hour, Damian watched Chloe. He watched as she navigated the floor, handling demanding customers with a mixture of grace and iron-clad boundaries. When she brought his steak, he inspected it like a jeweller examining a flawed diamond. It was perfect. He ate in silence. When it was time for the check, Damian dropped a heavy black American Express card onto the silver tray. Chloe processed the payment and brought it back. "Have a good evening, Mr. King," she said, turning to leave. "What's your name?" Damian asked suddenly. She paused, looking back over her shoulder. "Chloe." "Well, Chloe," Damian said, standing up and buttoning his suit jacket. "You have a terrible attitude for hospitality." "And you have a terrible disposition for dining out," Chloe shot back, realising a second too late that she might have gone too far. Damian didn't yell. He didn't threaten her. Instead, the corner of his mouth twitched upward into a microscopic smirk. He turned and walked out, his bodyguards trailing behind him like shadows. When Chloe returned to the table to clear the glasses, she froze. Sitting under the empty Scotch glass was a crisp, folded stack of $100 bills. $500 in total, and scribbled on the back of the merchant receipt in sharp, aggressive handwriting were 4 words: "See you next Tuesday." True to his word, Damian King returned the following Tuesday, and the Tuesday after that. Within a month, a bizarre, unspoken routine had been established at the Velvet Room. When Damian arrived, the other waiters didn't even pretend to argue. They simply cleared a path for Chloe. For Chloe, Table 4 had become her most lucrative, yet most infuriating responsibility. Damian tipped exorbitantly, often leaving more than her entire weekly paycheck, but he made her work for every single penny. He was relentlessly demanding. He would purposely drop a napkin just to see if she noticed. He would order off menu items that required her to negotiate with the temperamental head chef. He would ask her pointed, intrusive questions about her life, trying to peel back the layers of her professional armour. "Why are you working double shifts, Chloe?" Damian asked one evening, casually swirling a glass of deep red wine. "A girl with your sharp tongue could easily manipulate her way into a corporate office, yet here you are, serving me pasta." "Some of us actually like to work for our money, Mr. King," Chloe replied, grating fresh parmesan over his plate. "And I have responsibilities, real ones." "Everyone has responsibilities," Damian mused, his dark eyes fixed on her hands. "But you look tired. The bags under your eyes suggest you aren't sleeping. Is there a man keeping you awake? Or just a debt?" Chloe's hand slipped, the grater scraping loudly against the rim of the bowl. Her heart hammered against her ribs. How could he possibly know about the debt? Had Liam's loan sharks been following her? "That is none of your business," Chloe said, her voice colder than usual. She stepped back, clutching the cheese grater to her chest like a shield. "Enjoy your meal." Damian watched her retreat to the kitchen, his expression unreadable. He wasn't guessing. Damian never guessed. In his line of work, information was currency, and he was the wealthiest man in Chicago. After her third week serving him, he had instructed his right-hand man, a terrifyingly efficient fixer named Elias, to run a full background check on the feisty waitress who refused to bow to him. The file sitting on Damian's mahogany desk at his penthouse told a pathetic, entirely too common story. Chloe Adams, orphaned at 19, became the sole guardian of her teenage brother Liam. Liam, now 21, had developed a severe gambling addiction, placing bets on underground fights and rigged sports. But the file revealed one crucial, explosive detail that Damian hadn't anticipated. Liam didn't owe money to just any random street thug. He owed $75,000 to a man named Arthur Pendleton. Arthur was a mid-level enforcer running a loan sharking racket on the south side, and Arthur Pendleton worked for Damian King. Without knowing it, the woman who confidently poured Damian's water and scolded him for his drinking habits was essentially his property. Her brother's debt rolled uphill, straight into Damian's bank accounts. It was a delicious, twisted piece of irony that Damian was slowly deciding how to use. The tension broke 3 nights later, on a crowded Friday evening. Damian had come to the restaurant accompanied by 2 business associates. They were older, louder, and lacked the terrifying silent refinement that Damian possessed. One of them, a man named Gregory, was already intoxicated by the time Chloe approached the table to take their drink orders. "Well, look at this," Gregory slurred, leaning back and looking Chloe up and down with blatant disrespect. "Damian, you didn't tell me this place came with such scenic views. Hey, sweetheart, why don't you skip the drinks and just come sit on my lap?" Chloe's spine stiffened. She had dealt with drunk, entitled men before, but Gregory's proximity and the predatory look in his eyes made her skin crawl. "I'll give you a few more minutes to decide on your beverages," Chloe said professionally, turning to walk away. Before she could move, Gregory reached out and grabbed her wrist. His grip was tight, bruising. "I didn't say you were dismissed, sweetheart." Panic flared in Chloe's chest, but before she could yank her arm away, the atmosphere at the table shifted violently. Damian moved with a speed that was almost imperceptible. In a fraction of a second, he had reached across the table, his large hand clamping down over Gregory's wrist with bone-crushing force. The quiet elegance of the restaurant vanished, replaced by the suffocating, heavy aura of a predator about to strike. "Let go of her," Damian said softly. His voice barely rose above a whisper, but it carried a lethal weight that made the nearby tables fall dead silent. Gregory gasped, his face turning pale as Damian's fingers dug into his pressure points. He instantly released Chloe's wrist. "Damian, hey, I was just playing around," Gregory stammered, sweating profusely. "You don't touch the staff, and you certainly don't touch her," Damian stated, his eyes dark and empty. He released Gregory's wrist, shoving the man's arm back toward him. "Get out, before I decide to make an example of you right here on the carpet." Gregory didn't argue. He and the other associates scrambled out of the booth, practically running for the exit, leaving their coats behind in the coat room. Chloe stood frozen, rubbing her wrist, her heart racing. She looked at Damian, who was calmly adjusting his cuffs as if he hadn't just terrified 2 grown men out of the building. "Are you all right?" Damian asked, looking up at her. The coldness in his eyes had vanished, replaced by an intense, burning focus directed entirely at her. I'm fine," Chloe managed to say, her voice shaking slightly despite her best efforts. "You didn't have to do that. I could have handled him." "No one disrespects what is mine," Damian said. The words slipped out smoothly, heavily, hanging in the air between them. Chloe frowned, stepping back. "I am not yours, Mr. King. I am just your waitress." "For now," Damian murmured, picking up his glass of water. "Take the rest of the night off, Chloe. You look pale." "I can't afford to take the night off," she snapped, her pride flaring up to mask her fear. Damian reached into his jacket, pulled out a thick wad of cash, and tossed it onto the table. It was easily $2,000. "Consider your shift covered. Go home. Lock your doors." Chloe didn't want to take the money, but the throbbing in her wrist and the exhaustion in her bones won the battle. She grabbed the bills, gave him a stiff nod, and retreated to the locker room. An hour later, Chloe walked out the back exit of the Velvet Room, stepping into the damp, dimly lit alleyway that led to the employee parking lot. The cool night air felt good on her heated face. She just wanted to get home, make sure Liam was safe, and sleep for a week. But as she turned the corner toward her rusted sedan, two massive figures stepped out of the shadows, blocking her path. "Going somewhere, Miss Adams?" a gruff voice called out. A third man stepped forward into the glow of the flickering street lamp. It was Arthur Pendleton. He wore a cheap leather jacket and a cruel smile. "Your brother missed his payment yesterday," Arthur said, pulling a heavy steel pipe from his belt and tapping it against his palm. "We figured since he can't pay, maybe his big sister can cover the interest. We know you make good tips in this fancy place." Chloe backed up, but her back hit the solid brick wall of the restaurant. She was trapped. She clutched her purse, her mind racing for a way out. "I don't have it," Chloe lied, her voice trembling. "I get paid on Friday." "That's a shame," Arthur sneered, stepping closer, "because I don't like waiting." Suddenly the blinding headlights of a sleek black SUV flipped on at the end of the alley, bathing the scene in harsh, unforgiving light. The low growl of the engine echoed off the brick walls. Arthur and his men froze, raising their arms to shield their eyes. The driver's side door opened, and a pair of polished leather shoes stepped onto the wet pavement. Damian King stood illuminated by the headlights, adjusting his tailored jacket. He leaned against the door of his car, his eyes locked onto Arthur. "Arthur," Damian called out, his voice echoing in the narrow space, dripping with venom. "Did I or did I not tell you to stay away from the girl?" The heavy steel pipe slipped from Arthur's trembling fingers, clattering loudly against the damp pavement. All the colour drained from his face as he stared into the blinding headlights. In the Chicago underworld there were men you crossed and men you avoided. Then there was Damian King. To anger Damian was to court absolute ruin. A lesson the city had learned the hard way ever since the days of the old outfit, when ruthless figures like Tony Accardo ruled the streets. Damian was the modern incarnation of that absolute power. "Mr. King," Arthur stammered, his voice cracking. He practically shrank into himself. I didn't know. The file just said a brother owed the books. We were just collecting." "You were explicitly told by Elias yesterday to freeze the Adams account," Damian said, stepping away from the SUV. His footsteps were slow, deliberate, and terrifying. "When I give an order, Arthur, I expect it to be followed, not interpreted, not delayed, followed." "I swear the message didn't reach me," Arthur pleaded, holding his hands up defensively. Damian didn't raise his voice. He merely gestured with two fingers. From the shadows behind the SUV, Elias and another enforcer materialized. "Take him to the warehouse," Damian instructed coldly. "Relieve him of his collections route. If he ever steps foot within a 10-mile radius of the downtown district again, put him in the river." Arthur didn't even scream as Elias dragged him into the darkness of the alley. He knew better. Silence was the only way to ensure he kept his life. Chloe remained pressed against the brick wall, her chest heaving, the $2,000 in her pocket suddenly feeling like a lead weight. She watched as Damian turned his attention back to her. The menacing aura that had terrified Arthur dissipated, replaced by that familiar calculating gaze. "Get in the car, Chloe," Damian commanded softly. "I have my own car," she replied instinctively, though her knees were shaking so badly she doubted she could press the gas pedal. "Your car has a failing alternator, and you are in no condition to drive," Damian stated, opening the passenger door of his SUV. "Get in. I'm taking you home." Too exhausted to fight, Chloe climbed into the plush leather interior. The car smelled like expensive cedar and faint scotch. Damian slid into the driver's seat and pulled out of the alley, navigating the rain-slicked streets of Chicago in absolute silence. It wasn't until they were cruising down Lakeshore Drive that Chloe finally found her voice. "How did you know? About Arthur? About Liam?" "I am a man who likes to know the investments he makes," Damian answered, his eyes fixed on the road. "When a waitress refuses to flinch at my table, I make it my business to find out why. I had Elias look into your background. Imagine my surprise when I discovered that your brother's $75,000 debt belonged to a subsidiary of my own organization." Chloe felt a cold dread pool in her stomach. "So?" I owe you. Technically, Liam owes me, Damian corrected. But we both know Liam is a coward who hides behind his sister's apron. So yes, you owe me. I'll pay you back, Chloe said fiercely, her nails digging into her palms. Every penny. I'll work triple shifts. You will not work triple shifts at that pretentious steakhouse, Damian interrupted, pulling the SUV to a smooth stop outside Chloe's run-down apartment building. He turned to face her, the streetlights illuminating the sharp angles of his jaw. I am buying Liam's debt completely. In exchange, you're going to work for me. Chloe blinked. Work for you? Doing what? I don't know the first thing about whatever it is you do. I don't need another enforcer, Chloe. I need someone who isn't afraid of me, Damian said, his voice dropping an octave. I am offering you a very simple binding contract. The terms of agreement. The debt. The $75,000 is immediately forgiven and erased from the ledger. The brother. Liam will be sent to a high-end secure rehabilitation facility in upstate New York tomorrow morning. Damian will cover the cost. The employment. Chloe will resign from the Velvet Room. She will become the head of household and private hospitality manager at Damian's estate. The salary. She will be paid triple her current earnings with full benefits. Why? Chloe whispered, staring at the man who held her entire life in his hands. Why would you do all this for a waitress who insulted your choice of liquor? Damian leaned closer, his dark eyes searching hers. Because, Chloe, in a world full of yes men and terrified sycophants, you are the only person who looks at me and sees a man instead of a monster. Now, do we have a deal? Chloe looked at her bleak apartment building, thought of Liam's desperate situation, and then looked back at Damian. She extended her hand. Deal. 6 months later, the sprawling King estate in Winnetka was running smoother than it had in a decade. Chloe had seamlessly transitioned from a struggling waitress to the iron-fisted manager of Damian's personal life. She commanded the kitchen staff, organised his high-stakes diplomatic dinners, and curated his schedule. More importantly, she'd become his confidant. The sharp banter that began at table 4 had evolved into late-night conversations by the estate's massive fireplace. Damian was ruthless in the streets, but within the walls of his home, with Chloe, the armour cracked. However, peace in the syndicate world was always temporary. Tensions had been brewing with the rival Calabrese faction. To prevent a bloody street war, Damian agreed to host a sit-down at his estate. It was a risky move, but necessary to maintain his undisputed control over the city's ports. The dining room was heavy with tension. 5 men sat around the long oak table. Damian sat at the head, projecting absolute chilling authority. Chloe stood discreetly by the mahogany sideboard, acting as the silent orchestrator of the evening's hospitality. "We are willing to concede the South Side shipping lanes," said Vincent Calabrese, a vicious man with a scarred neck. He smiled, though it didn't reach his eyes. "To new partnerships, Damian. Let us toast." Vincent gestured to one of his own men, who stepped forward with a vintage bottle of Macallan 25 and 2 crystal glasses. He poured the amber liquid and slid one glass toward Damian. Chloe watched the exchange. Her heart skipped a beat. She knew Damian better than anyone. She knew he never accepted a poured drink from a rival. But more importantly, she noticed the slight, almost imperceptible tremor in the hands of the man who poured it. She remembered the subtle lesson Damian had taught her months ago. Watch the hands, Chloe. A liar's eyes can stay steady, but guilty hands always shake. As Damian reached out to grasp the crystal tumbler, ready to seal the treaty, Chloe moved. She didn't run. She glided across the room with the professional grace she had perfected at the Velvet Room. Before Damian's fingers could close around the glass, Chloe intercepted it, lifting the tumbler from the table. "My apologies, Mr. Calabrese," Chloe said loudly, her voice ringing clear in the silent room. "But Mr. King has a strict regimen. His physician has advised against consuming unvetted spirits due to an ongoing medication." The room froze. Vincent's smile vanished, replaced by a look of murderous rage. "Who is this woman?" Vincent spat. "You let the help interrupt a sit-down?" "She is my manager," Damian said smoothly, though his eyes darted to Chloe, reading the silent, desperate warning in her posture. He slowly pulled his hand back. "And she is very thorough." "It is an insult," Vincent growled, standing up. "Drink the scotch, Damian, or the truce is off." Chloe didn't flinch. Instead, she turned to the man who poured the drink. "If the scotch is so pristine, perhaps you would like to test it first." She held the glass out to the underling. The man paled, taking a hurried step backward, his eyes darting to the exits. That was all the confirmation Damian needed. In a flash of violence, the room erupted. Damian's guards, led by Elias, drew their weapons. The Calabrese men scrambled, but they were outgunned and outmaneuvered in Damian's territory. Within seconds, Vincent and his men were forced to their knees, staring down the barrels of suppressed pistols. "Poison," Damian murmured, standing up slowly. He looked at the crystal glass still in Chloe's steady hand. He then looked at Vincent. "A coward's weapon. Take them to the basement. I will deal with them shortly." As the room was cleared, leaving only Damian and Chloe, the heavy silence returned. Chloe finally set the glass down, her hands suddenly shaking violently now that the adrenaline was fading. Damian walked over to her. He didn't speak immediately. He reached out, his large, warm hands gently enveloping her trembling ones. "You saved my life," Damian said, his voice stripped of all its usual cold command. It was raw, vulnerable. "You would have noticed," Chloe whispered, looking down at his hands holding hers. "Maybe. Maybe not," Damian replied, stepping closer until there was barely any space between them. "I was distracted." "By what?" "By the fact that my head of household is the only thing I care about in this room," Damian confessed softly. He reached up, tucking a stray lock of hair behind her ear. "The debt is gone, Chloe. Liam is clean. You have enough money in your own accounts to leave tonight and never look back. Why are you still here?" Chloe looked up, meeting those dark slate eyes that used to terrify her. The fear was entirely gone, replaced by a fierce, undeniable loyalty and something far deeper. "Because," Chloe said, a soft smile finally breaking across her face, "someone has to make sure you don't ruin a good steak with the wrong wine. And because I belong here." Damian's chest rose in a deep breath before he leaned down, pressing his lips to hers. It was a kiss that sealed a very different kind of contract. She wasn't just the waitress who stood her ground, and she wasn't just his employee. Chloe Adams had faced the king of the underworld, and in doing so, she had become his queen. Did you expect that explosive twist at the dinner table? Chloe went from a struggling waitress to ruling the underworld beside the city's most dangerous man. If you loved this intense, slow-burn mafia romance and want more thrilling stories of ordinary people facing extraordinary danger, hit that like button right now. Don't forget to share this video with your fellow drama lovers and subscribe to our channel so you never miss another heart-pounding tale. See you next time.